Some stories don't begin with words, but with the weight of a broken heart carried in bare feet down a dusty road. Some secrets span entire generations, waiting for the precise moment to be unearthed. And some people learn, far too late, that running from love never erases the pain. It only postpones the reunion with who we were always meant to be. This is the story of a woman who abandoned what she loved most to protect it. Of a man who buried his family and swore never to open his heart again. And of a baby swaddled in a faded blue blanket and a mystery of antique silver who brought back to life what everyone believed was lost forever. Between the silence of a forgotten ranch and the distant crow of roosters at dawn, destiny weaves its threads with patience and transforms absence into a new beginning. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The house was too big for one man. Joaquin woke every day before sunrise, not because he had to. The ranch ran itself these days, with the few remaining hands tending the cattle and the cornfields, but because the silence of dawn was less heavy than that of the afternoon, less cruel. He'd descend the wooden porch steps, the coffee already brewed in the old percolator, and sit on the same bench where he used to sit with Anna years ago, when laughter and plans still filled the air. The clock in the living room read 7:20, always 7:20. He'd never had the heart to fix it. The mornings were chilly that time of year. The wind swept down from the mountains, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild grass. Joaquin pulled his plaid shirt tighter over his broad shoulders and gazed at the horizon, where light was beginning to tear through the darkness. The wooden gate, 200 yards from the house, creaked in the breeze. He watched the trees sway, their branches moving in a slow dance, and felt, as he always did, the emptiness settle in his chest. It had been 3 years since the burial, 3 years since the fever had taken Anna and their son within a week. He hadn't cried at the funeral. He couldn't. He'd just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching dirt being shoveled onto the caskets. After that, the ranch became just work. Routine, survival. Joaquin finished his coffee, rinsed the mug in the sink, and headed for the barn. He needed to check the feed, gather tools for repairing the north fence. Life went on, even when it felt like there was no reason for it to. That's when he heard it. A cry, faint, muffled, coming from the direction of the gate. He stopped, frowning. It wasn't an animal. It was human, a child's. He dropped his shovel and walked quickly down the dirt road, his heavy footsteps breaking the morning quiet. The sound grew clearer with every step. When he reached the porch, he paused. On the bottom step, nestled in a worn but clean blue blanket, lay a baby. Joaquin stood frozen. The world around him seemed to warp. The wind died down. The rooster's calls vanished. Only the cry, sharp, insistent, fragile, filled the air. He knelt slowly, as if afraid of breaking something sacred. His eyes scanned the baby's face, rosy cheeks, eyes squeezed shut tight, tiny fists clenched. It couldn't be more than 2 months old. And then, as he reached out to lift the blanket, Joaquin saw it. Tucked into the fabric, glinting in the faint morning light, was an antique silver brooch. Small, delicate. In its center, etched with precision, was the symbol of a seahorse. Joaquin's heart skipped a beat. He knew that brooch. It had belonged to Anna. A gift from her grandmother, a family heirloom she wore every Sunday to church. On the day of the burial, when he'd gone to dress her body, the brooch was gone. He'd searched for days, rummaging through drawers, asking neighbors, nothing. It had vanished into thin air. And now it was here, with an abandoned child, on the porch of his own house. Joaquin felt his legs go weak. He scooped the baby into his arms, awkwardly, tremblingly, and walked into the big house, closing the door behind him as if to bar the incomprehensible. The crying echoed through the empty rooms, and for the first time in 3 years, Joaquin felt something other than emptiness, fear. Joaquin didn't know how to care for a baby. He'd never held one other than his own son, and that had been brief. Just a few days before the fever, such a short time, he could barely recall the feeling. Now, with this small body in his arms, trembling and wet with tears, he felt more lost than ever. He laid the child on the kitchen table, improvising a bed with clean towels. The baby cried non-stop, its face red, its legs kicking. Joaquin looked around desperately. Milk. It needed milk. He went to the old refrigerator. It still worked, thank God, and took out what was left from the morning. He warmed it slowly on the stove, tested it on his fingertip, and then he realized he didn't have a bottle. He cursed under his breath. He took a clean cloth, dampened the tip with the warm milk, and brought it to the baby's mouth. The child latched on fiercely, desperately, and slowly the crying subsided. Joaquin held his breath, concentrating, feeling sweat trickle down his forehead. When the baby finally calmed, he re-wrapped it in the blue blanket and carried it to the living room. He sat in the worn leather armchair, the child in his lap, and remained there, motionless, listening to the light, rhythmic breathing. The brooch lay on the small table beside him. Joaquin picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. The seahorse gleamed in the window light. He knew every curve of that design. He'd seen Anna wear it hundreds of times. Who left this here, and why? Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Joachim rose slowly, careful not to wake the baby, and went to answer it. On the porch stood Mrs. Gable, his nearest neighbor. She lived 2 miles away, in a brick house surrounded by chickens and pecan trees. She was a woman with white hair pulled into a tight bun, her face weathered by the sun and her hands calloused. She carried a basket covered with a dish towel. "Morning, Joachim. Heard there was a baby crying around here first thing. Came to see if it was true." He hesitated. Mrs. Gable had a hawk's nose for gossip. If he told her everything, the story would be all over town by nightfall. "It's true," he said, opening the door. "Someone left him here on the porch, in the dead of night." She entered without being invited, her eyes scanning everything. She approached the armchair and looked at the baby with the expression of someone appraising a chicken at the market. "Boy or girl?" "Boy." "And they didn't leave a note? Nothing? Just this?" Joachim showed her the brooch. Mrs. Gable narrowed her eyes. She took the object, turned it over, and handed it back without a word. "Don't recognize it, but I know people who abandon children. It's not new." She sighed, placing the basket on the table. "I brought some powdered milk, a bottle, and a few diapers left over from my granddaughter. I don't know what you plan to do, but a baby needs care. A lot of care. I know that. You do." She raised an eyebrow. "Because it looks to me like you barely know how to hold him right." Joachim pressed his lips together. He had no answer for that. Mrs. Gable sighed again, this time with less sharpness. "Look, Joachim, I know you haven't asked anyone for help since Anna. Well, but this is different. If you're going to keep this boy, you're going to need support. And you'll need to decide fast what you're going to do, because someone's going to ask, and you'll have to answer." She turned and left without saying goodbye. Joachim stood there looking at the basket on the table, and then, for the first time in 3 years, he murmured a prayer. Short, simple. "God, help me understand." The road was empty when Clara looked back. She had walked all night, her feet raw inside her old sandals, her dress clinging to her body from sweat and dust. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't drunk. She had just walked, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. Now, sitting in the shade of a gnarled tree by the side of the road, she was crying. She was crying because she had done the unthinkable. She was crying because she saw no other way. She was crying because she knew she would never be the same. The baby's face, those dark eyes, so much like hers, came to mind like an open wound. She had held him for a few weeks, fed him what she could, rocked him on cold nights, and then she left him. She left him because she knew she couldn't protect him. She left him because the truth she carried was too heavy to be spoken. She left him because that man, Joachim, the lonely farmer who never knew she existed, was the only person in the world capable of giving the boy what she never could, a safe home. But how to explain? How to say that this baby carried in his blood a secret buried for years, a lie woven from fear and shame? Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and stood up. She had to keep going. She couldn't go back. She couldn't risk it. If she went back, he would find out everything. And the truth would destroy what was left. Joachim spent the following days learning to care for the baby. He learned to prepare bottles, change diapers, rock the baby until he fell asleep. The house, once silent, was now filled with cries, gurgles, the sound of hurried footsteps in the middle of the night. He was exhausted, but strangely alive. Mrs. Gable would show up every couple of days, always bringing something: clothes, more milk, a crocheted blanket. She didn't ask questions, she just observed. "Are you going to register him?" she asked one afternoon, while folding the washed diapers. Joachim stopped, a bottle in his hand. "I don't know." "You don't know?" She frowned. "Joachim, a child without a birth certificate becomes a problem. And you know how it is. People will ask, people will talk. Let them talk. It's not that simple." She crossed her arms. "If someone shows up wanting to claim him, you won't have any way to prove he's well here, that he's being cared for, that I didn't steal him?" Joachim cut in, his voice dry. Mrs. Gable sighed. "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant." She didn't answer. She just finished folding the diapers and left, closing the door with more force than necessary. Joachim was left alone, looking at the baby sleeping peacefully in the makeshift crib made of drawers and blankets. The brooch was still on the small table. He picked it up again, as he did every night, and felt the weight of the cold silver in his palm. "Anna, what are you trying to tell me?" No answer came. Only the wind blowing against the window and the distant cry of a baby beginning to wake up. That night, Joachim dreamed. He dreamed of Anna, standing on the porch, holding a child in her arms. She was smiling, that smile he hadn't seen in so long, and saying something he couldn't hear. But at the end, before she disappeared, she pointed to the road. And there, walking slowly through the dust, was a woman, thin, tired, in a worn dress. She looked at the house. She looked at him. And Joachim woke up, with his heart racing, with the certainty that this was not just a dream. It was a warning. The routine began to form little by little, like roots spreading slowly through the earth. Joachim would wake with the first cry, always before sunrise. He would prepare a bottle, change a diaper, rock the baby until he slept again. Then he would go out to tend to the farm, but now with the baby in his arms, wrapped in the crocheted blanket Mrs. Gable had brought. The farmhands were surprised at first. Zeka, the oldest, who had been herding cattle since Joachim was a boy, stopped in front of him on the second day and asked directly, "Is he yours, boss?" "He is now," Joachim replied, without stopping his walk. Zeka didn't press, but the look he exchanged with the others said it all. This man has gone crazy. Joachim didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt he had something to protect, something to cherish, and that was enough. Weeks passed. The baby, whom Joachim had started calling Miguel, a name that had just popped out of him without much thought, was growing fast. He was already smiling. He could already grip Joachim's finger with surprising strength. At night, when the rancher placed him in the makeshift crib and watched his gentle breathing, he felt a strange ache in his chest. It was longing, but not only that, it was also fear of losing him again. One afternoon, while he was mending the fence near the pasture, with Miguel lying in a basket in the shade, Joachim heard the sound of a car coming up the dirt road. He stood up, wiping his hands on the cloth tucked into his belt, and looked. It was an old car, faded blue, kicking up clouds of dust. It stopped near the gate, and a thin man with glasses, wearing a rumpled dress shirt and thin fabric pants, got out. He carried a leather briefcase under his arm. Joaquim frowned. "Good afternoon," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "Are you Joaquim Alves?" "I am. Who's asking?" "My name is Otavio Lira. I'm a caseworker for the county. I received an anonymous tip that there's an undocumented child on this property." Joaquim's blood ran cold. Undocumented? No registration, no papers. Otavio looked around, his eyes scanning the ranch with suspicion. "May I see him?" Joaquim clenched his fists. He wanted to send the man away. He wanted to say no, that Miguel was fine, that it was none of anyone's business, but he knew that would only make things worse. "You may," he said, controlling his voice, "but with respect." Otavio nodded, following Joaquim to where Miguel slept peacefully in the basket under the shade of the tree. The caseworker bent down, examining the baby with a technical eye. He checked the diapers, the clothes, the skin. He made notes in his briefcase. "He seems well cared for," he admitted finally. "But that doesn't change the fact that the situation is irregular. Abandoned children need to be brought before the court. There are procedures, Mr. Alves. He wasn't abandoned. He was left here, with me." Joaquim gripped the hoe handle firmly. "And I'm going to take care of him. Do you have any connection to the child? Are you related?" "I don't know." Otavio raised his eyebrows. "You don't know?" Joaquim hesitated. Then for the first time he told him about the brooch. He told him it was his wife's. He told him it had disappeared the day of the funeral. He told him it didn't make sense, but it was there, on the blanket, along with Miguel. Otavio listened in silence. When Joaquim finished, the caseworker closed his briefcase and sighed. "Mr. Alves, I understand you're emotionally involved, but what you're telling me, it's purely circumstantial. It proves nothing. And without proof, the court could order the child's removal. Then I'll get the proof. How? I don't know yet." Joaquim looked at Miguel, who slept serenely. "But I will." Otavio tucked the briefcase under his arm and walked back to the car. "I'll give you 15 days, Mr. Alves. 15 days to regularize the situation. Registration, documentation, a temporary custody declaration, whatever it takes. Otherwise, I'll be back with a court order." And he drove away, leaving dust to rise on the road. Joaquim stood still, staring at the horizon. 15 days. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. The fever started in the early hours of the 10th day. Joaquim woke up to crying, but it wasn't the usual cry, the one for hunger or a dirty diaper. It was different, sharper, desperate. He jumped up, lit the lamp, and ran to the crib. Miguel was flushed, his body hot, his eyes half closed and wet. He was trembling, his little hands opened and closed in the air, reaching for something that wasn't there. "No," Joaquim murmured, scooping the baby into his arms. "No, no, no." He ran to the kitchen, grabbed a clean cloth, wet it with cold water, and placed it on Miguel's forehead. The baby cried, struggled, and Joaquim felt despair rise like a wave. It was the same fever, the same one that had taken Anna and their son, the same one he had never been able to fight. "You're not taking this one too," he said between clenched teeth, his voice choked. "You're not. And you need to get some sleep, or you'll collapse too." "I won't." "You will." She pushed Joaquim onto the sofa, took Miguel firmly, and started working. "You're no good to anyone if you pass out from exhaustion. I'll take care of him now." Joaquim wanted to protest, but his body wouldn't obey. He lay down on the sofa, his eyes heavy, and fell asleep to the sound of Donna Carmen humming softly in the kitchen. Miguel improved slowly. The fever broke on the second day, but he was still weak, crying little, sleeping a lot. Joaquim didn't leave his side. He rocked him, whispered to him, placed his hand on the baby's chest just to feel his heart beating. "You're not leaving," he'd say softly. "I promise you're not leaving." Donna Carmen stayed on the ranch for 3 days. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for them. At night, she sat on the porch with Joaquin, and they shared the silence. "You're getting too attached," she said one of those nights. "If the court takes him, they won't take him. Joaquin, they won't." He looked at her, his eyes firm. "I'm going to the county clerk's office tomorrow. I'll talk to the priest. I'll get what I need. And if you don't?" He didn't answer. He just squeezed the silver brooch he now carried in his pocket. On the 5th day after the fever broke, Miguel smiled again. Joaquin held him on his lap, pointing out the chickens in the yard, when the baby let out a soft, contented giggle and grabbed the farmer's finger. Joaquin felt something inside him shatter, and for the first time in 3 years, he cried. He cried, holding Miguel, cried with his face buried in the crocheted blanket, cried with the certainty that this child, wherever he came from, was now part of him. Donna Carmen, watching from the window, wiped her own eyes and returned to the kitchen. There was hope. There was still hope. Joaquin went to town the next morning. He carried Miguel, wrapped in the blanket, and walked into the county clerk's office with the bearing of someone who wouldn't take no for an answer. The clerk, a man with a graying mustache and thick-rimmed glasses, listened to the story with a skeptical expression. "Mr. Elvis, you're asking me to register a child who isn't biologically yours, without any documents proving legal ties, and whose mother is unknown. This is irregular." "I know it's irregular," Joaquin said, placing the pin on the counter, "but this proves he's connected to me, to my family." The clerk picked up the pin, examined it, and handed it back. "This proves nothing, sir. It could have been stolen. It could have been found. It could have been anything. Then what do I need? A declaration from the biological mother or a court order for temporary custody? Without that, my hands are tied." Joaquin clenched his fists. "What if I get married?" The clerk blinked. "Beg your pardon? If I get married, can I adopt the child with my wife? Does that make it easier?" "Well, yes, technically, but you would have to. Then that's what I'll do." And he left the office before the man could finish. At the church, Father Augusto greeted him with surprise. "Joaquin, it's been years since I've seen you around." "I know, Father, but I need your help." He told him everything. The baby, the pin, the social worker, the deadline. The priest listened in silence, his fingers laced over the table. "My son, what you're proposing is generous, but it's also hasty. Marriage isn't a solution for bureaucracy. I know that, but I have no other choice. And who would this woman be? Do you have someone in mind?" Joaquin hesitated. He didn't. The priest sighed. "Joaquin, I can write a letter attesting to your character. I can say you're a good man, that the child is being cared for, but that won't solve everything. You need real proof, and above all, you need honesty." "Honesty? If this child has a mother, she needs to be found, not to take her away from you." The priest raised a hand, seeing Joaquin's face fall. "But so the truth can come out. Because secrets, my son, have a way of coming back, and when they do, they tend to hurt." "What is it?" "This morning, when I went to town for supplies, I overheard some women talking. They said they saw a thin young woman in a worn-out dress wandering around here a few weeks ago. She was asking about you, about the ranch." Joaquin's blood ran cold. "And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't know if it was important. But now," she looked at Miguel, "now I think it is." Joaquin sat down slowly, running a hand over his face. "Where is she?" "No one knows. She disappeared after that." He was silent for a long time. Then, in a low voice, almost a whisper, "She'll come back." "How do you know?" "Because a mother always comes back." And Joaquin looked out the window at the dirt road lit by the moon, waiting. Clara returned on a late afternoon, when the dust on the road shimmered golden in the low sun. She was thinner, her dress even more worn, her bare feet marked by calluses and cuts. But she was coming, step by step. Her heart heavy, her eyes fixed on the wooden gate she had passed through months ago. She stopped a few yards from the house. Joaquin was on the porch, sitting on the bench where he used to have his coffee. Miguel slept on his lap, wrapped in the crocheted blanket. When he saw the woman, he didn't move. He just watched her. Clara took a few more hesitant steps. She stopped again. Her hands trembled. Is he all right?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Joaquin didn't answer immediately. He looked at Miguel, then at her. "He is." A pause. "Without you." The words were like a slap. Clara closed her eyes, tears streaming silently. I know I don't have the right to be here, but I needed to see. I needed to know if he was, if I took care of him." Joaquin stood up slowly, holding Miguel tightly. "You left a child on a stranger's porch, with no explanation, no name. Just this." He pulled the pin from his pocket and threw it at her feet. "And now you come back, expecting what? Forgiveness?" Clara bent down, picking up the pin with trembling hands. The seahorse gleamed, impassive. I wasn't expecting forgiveness." She lifted her face, her eyes red. "But I need you to know the truth." "What truth?" Clara took a deep breath, and she told him she was Anna's daughter. The child everyone believed had died in childbirth 28 years ago, when Anna was only 16 and not yet married to Joaquin. The pregnancy had been hidden, treated as a shame by the family. When Clara was born, they told Anna she had died, but it was a lie. The baby was given to a distant family, raised far away, without knowing where she came from. Years later, as an adult, Clara discovered the truth in an old envelope, kept by the aunt who raised her. Documents, letters, Ana Alves' name, Joaquim's name. She tried to find them, but when she arrived at the town, it was already too late. Anna had died, and Joaquim lived alone, buried in silence and grief. Clara stayed at a distance, watching. She didn't have the courage to introduce herself. She didn't know how. She was afraid of rejection, afraid he wouldn't believe her, afraid of stirring up a pain that seemed incurable. Then, months ago, she got pregnant. The father of the child abandoned her when he found out. She was left alone, with no resources, nowhere to go. And, in an act of desperation and love, she decided to do what she thought was right. Leave the child, Anna's grandson, with the only man who could protect him, Joaquim. She placed the brooch on the blanket because she knew he would recognize it. She knew that somehow he would understand. When Clara finished, the silence was absolute. Joaquim was pale, his eyes fixed on her, his breathing heavy. "You," he could barely form the words. "You're her daughter?" Clara nodded, crying. "I am. And this child, he's your grandson." She looked at Miguel, her face contorted with pain and love. "He's Anna's grandson. He's all that's left of her." Joaquim felt his legs weaken. He sat back down on the bench, holding Miguel so tightly that the baby whimpered. And then he broke down. He cried as he hadn't cried since the funeral. He cried for the wife he lost, for the daughter he never knew existed, for the grandson he almost didn't meet. Clara fell to her knees in the dust, sobbing, her hands over her face. And there, in that golden afternoon, the truth, hard, cruel, but finally free, settled upon them like a weight that, by being shared, began to become bearable. Otavio Lira returned on the 14th day, punctual as a clock. He got out of the car with the same leather briefcase, the same technical expression, and walked to the porch where Joaquim was waiting. "Mr. Alves, I'm here to check on the situation." "The situation has changed," said Joaquim firmly. Otavio raised his eyebrows. "Changed how?" The child's mother appeared. The social worker froze for a moment, processing. "The mother? Where is she?" "Here." Clara came out from inside the house, carrying Miguel in her arms. She was clean, wearing clothes borrowed from Donna Carmen, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. Still thin, still marked, but standing. Otavio looked from Joaquim to Clara, suspicious. "And you are?" "Clara Alves," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I'm the mother of this child, and the daughter of Ana Alves, Joaquim's wife." Otavio frowned, clearly lost. "Wait, you're saying you're her daughter?" "Yes." Clara took a deep breath. "It was a long story, but it's true. And Miguel, he's my son, and his grandson." She pointed to Joaquim. The social worker ran a hand over his face, visibly confused. "Mr. Alves, the story you told me 2 weeks ago was that you didn't know where the child came from. And I didn't." Joaquim crossed his arms. "But now I do. And now we have what you asked for. The biological mother declaring that she wants me to keep the child, and documents proving the connection." Clara extended an envelope. Inside, copies of the papers she had kept, her birth certificate with Anna's name, letters, everything she had. Otavio took it, examined it slowly. "This is, unusual," he sighed. "But if you are willing to sign a voluntary guardianship declaration in favor of the grandfather, and if he agrees to formalize the guardianship, then yes, I can forward it to the court." "I agree," said Joaquim, without hesitation. "I do too," said Clara, her voice choked with emotion. I just want him to be okay, to grow up safe, to have what I never had." Otavio closed his briefcase, thoughtful. "I'll need a few more things. Witnesses, testimonials, a final property inspection." "You can come whenever you want," said Joaquim. "Then I'll be back in 3 days, and if everything is in order, I think we can make it official." He left. Clara and Joaquim remained on the porch in silence. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what? For not sending me away?" "For accepting." Joaquim looked at Miguel, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You are Anna's daughter, and he is her grandson." Pause. "You are family." Clara cried again, but this time they were tears of relief. In the following days, the farm transformed. Donna Carmen brought neighbors to witness. Father Augusto came and wrote a detailed letter attesting to Joaquim's character. Zeka and the other employees, previously suspicious, now helped with small repairs to the house, preparing everything for the inspection. Clara stayed. She slept in the guest room, helped in the kitchen, took care of Miguel. She and Joaquim spoke little. There was still a distance, an open wound that needed time to heal, but they were there, together, trying. At night, Joaquim sat on the porch bench again, but now he was no longer alone. Clara sat beside him, cradling Miguel. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like a home. Otavio returned on the agreed-upon morning, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, a middle-aged woman got out of the car, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression severe. She wore a formal dark suit and carried a briefcase even larger than the social workers. "Mr. Alves," said Otavio, his voice tense. "This is Dr. Helena Vargas. She's from the district attorney's office. She's been assigned to evaluate the case personally." Joaquim felt his stomach churn. "Evaluate what? I've done everything that was asked." "Yes, but..." Otavio hesitated, looking at the prosecutor. There was an additional report. Someone questioned the legitimacy of Mrs. Clara's story, suggested it might be fabricated. The words fell like stones. Clara, who was on the porch holding Miguel, paled. "Fabricated?" Joaquim repeated, his voice rising. "Who said that?" "Anonymous tips don't reveal identities," said the prosecutor, her voice cold and protocol-driven. "But they are taken seriously, especially when children are involved." She walked to the porch, her eyes scanning, evaluating every detail. "Mrs. Clara, may I see your documents again?" Clara extended the envelope with trembling hands. The prosecutor examined everything, line by line. Then she looked at her. You claim to be the biological daughter of Ana Alves. However, there is no official birth record directly connecting you to her, only these papers. I can't just accept a narrative without a solid legal foundation. Then what do you want? Joaquim took a step forward, fists clenched. DNA? Witnesses? What? I want coherence. I want transparency. The prosecutor looked at Clara. And I want to understand why a mother would abandon her own child and only return months later, precisely when there's a risk of losing custody. Clara opened her mouth, but couldn't answer. The prosecutor's words hit her like arrows. It was true. It was exactly what it looked like. It was Mrs. Carmam who broke the silence. "Doctor," she said, appearing on the porch with a coffee tray, "you want coherence? Then I'll give it to you. I've known Joaquim for 40 years. He's not a man to lie. And this young woman," she pointed to Clara, "I saw her arrive here weeks ago. I saw the way she looks at this child. It's not a look of deceit. It's the look of someone who suffers." The prosecutor accepted the coffee, but her expression didn't change. "I appreciate the testimony, ma'am, but it's not enough." "Then ask the priest," Mrs. Carmam insisted. "Ask the clerk. Ask the neighbors. They'll all tell you the same thing. This child is being cared for. This child is loved. And if you take her away, you'll be destroying a family that's being built." The prosecutor was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, she sighed. "I'll grant another 15 days. During this period, I want a DNA test done to confirm the indirect familial relationship between Ms. Clara and Mr. Joaquim. If the analysis confirms that she is, in fact, the biological daughter of Ana Alves, then I will recommend favorably to the judge. Otherwise," she looked at Miguel, "the child will be placed in temporary foster care while we search for the real mother." Joaquim felt the ground disappear from under his feet, but Clara, surprisingly, took a step forward. "I'll do the test." Her voice, once weak, was now firm. "I'll do it. And I'll prove who I say I am, because this is the truth. And the truth," she looked at Miguel, her eyes full of tears, "the truth is all we have left." Joaquim dropped the hammer and walked to the gate, his heart pounding. Clara came out of the house holding Miguel and stood on the porch. Otavio got out of the car, envelope in hand. "Mr. Alves, Ms. Clara." He opened the envelope slowly, his eyes scanning the paper. Then, for the first time, he smiled. The test confirmed the genetic compatibility between Ms. Clara and Mr. Joaquim through markers inherited from Ana Alves is 99.7%. He looked at Clara. "You are, in fact, her biological daughter." Clara collapsed. She fell to her knees right there on the porch, sobbing with Miguel in her arms. Joaquim rushed over, picked them both up, and for the first time since it all began, let himself be hugged. Otavio cleared his throat, visibly moved. "The prosecutor has granted permanent custody to Mr. Joaquim, with Clara registered as the biological mother and co-legal guardian. You are officially a family." Father Augusto celebrated a special mass of Thanksgiving, and half the town showed up. Joaquim and Clara began to talk, really talk, about Ana, about the past, about the wounds they both carried. One afternoon, sitting on the porch while Miguel slept in his basket, Clara asked, Do you think she knew that I was alive?" Joaquim was silent for a while. "I think she suspected. I always saw her looking at the road as if she were waiting for someone. I thought it was longing for people who had left, but now," he looked at Clara, "I think it was you. She was waiting for you to come back." Clara cried again, but they were gentle tears. "I wish I'd come back sooner. I wish I'd known her." "She knew you," Joaquim pointed to Miguel. "Through him, through you, and now she's at peace." Joaquim had planted a small vegetable garden near the kitchen, and Clara tended it with dedication. Miguel was growing fast, already crawling, already babbling his first syllables. On a Sunday morning after Mass, Joaquim dug a hole next to the big house and planted a young yellow ipe tree. "Why an ipe?" Clara asked, watching. Because Anna loved them. She said it was the most beautiful tree in the world. He patted the dirt around the sapling. And because, when this tree grows, Miguel will know that here was always his place, your place. Clara hugged Joaquim, and for the first time, he didn't flinch. He accepted, and he returned the embrace. That night, sitting on the porch while Miguel slept peacefully inside, Clara asked, "Do you think we did the right thing?" Joaquim looked at her, at the ranch bathed in moonlight, at the young ipe sapling that would one day be a tree. "I think we did what had to be done." A pause. "And I think Anna would be proud." Clara smiled. "So now, it's home." Joaquim nodded. "Now it's home." And for the first time in years, the silence of the ranch didn't weigh heavy. It was just peace. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in their place? Comment and share with someone special.